Well, now everybody in this room knows how Christopher humbled the entire student body of Oxford University. Would John Theon and Bob Carter come up and join Christopher here on the stage, and we'll take about 15 minutes or so of questions. I think there are microphones around, or should be getting around. And following that, after the question period, we'll have about a minute or so from the fellow who's mostly responsible for the technical quality of the meeting, and that's James Taylor, the editor of Environment and Climate News. And then we will close with some comments from our fearless leader, who will no doubt be telling us about the 3rd annual climate change conference next year. So, a microphone and a question. I can't. Are there microphones out there? Well, if this fellow right here can really yell it out, give it a shot. Oh, here we go. There's a mic. Okay. Stand up.
Thanks. My question is for the gentleman who gave the talk on disaster preparedness. I'd like you to address the issue of probabilities. You yourself said essentially you can't forecast. Yet any disaster preparedness is based on some knowledge which enables you to deploy your resources. Would you please comment?
Bob Carter.
Indeed, I thought somebody with unerring skill would put their finger on that point. It's a measure of how few people are thinking about this, that question, which is a profound one, and to which I certainly don't know the answer, isn't even being asked. We do not know what caused the Younger Dryas. The Younger Dryas is just one of literally hundreds of similar past climatic events. Sometimes they're warmings, sometimes they're coolings. The coolings, from our perspective, are more dangerous. Obviously, any future planning or hazard response has to acknowledge that we can't predict, and therefore it'll be probabilistic in a sense by analysing the ancient record. But I believe it is quite, almost unfair to expect me to provide that answer. That's 5 years or 10 years or 20 years more research that's needed, but where's the money to pay for that? The money is all being squandered on hypothetical climate change, not real climate change. So thank you for the question. I think it's right on the nail. Christopher or John might like to comment on it.
Peter Ferrara, Institute for Policy Innovation and American Spectator. This question is to Lord Monckton. Would you please run for President of the United States?
You can't.
I tell you what, if you will obtain citizenship for me, and if you will make sure that I too can have a Hawaii birth certificate, I will stand.
Hi.
Sam?
For Lord Monckton, man is currently worldwide emitting approximately 30 billion metric tons of CO2. Would you please compare that to the amount of natural CO2 that is in the atmosphere?
Gosh, that's a bit of a yorker for me. Yes, I think roughly speaking, what is said by the IPCC is that around 1/3 of the concentration of CO2 in the atmosphere, or perhaps I think it's now getting on for 40%, is anthropogenic. However, to put that in perspective, that means that in the last 250 years, the proportion of the atmosphere occupied by CO2 has gone up by all of 1 part in 10,000.
I have one over here for Christopher Monckton, please. I thought your debate or your presentation in front of the college students was at Cambridge.
Was it? Yes, it was.
And I also thought that you recently engaged in a debate, 4 of you, and at St. Andrews, and I wonder if you would relate the story on that for us, please.
I'll be delighted, yes. St. Andrews University has the most ancient debating union for the undergraduates in Britain, founded in 1794. And they invited Richard Courtney, who is an IPCC expert reviewer, but he's on the side of the angels. They invited Professor Niklas Mörner, who's the world's greatest expert on sea level, having published 520 papers on the subject. And they invited me to go and debate with 3 bedwetters on the global warming question. And we were told by the committee at the outset that we would have 97% of the student body against us. They'd taken some sort of a survey. And so they said, did I mind facing a hostile audience? And I said, no, I love it. And they said, why? I said, well, you can either preach to the converted, or you can preach to convert. And I prefer to do the latter. So we started off, Richard Courtney ably set out the terms of the debate. There was an MP, member of the Scottish Parliament, of no particular eloquence or eminence on the other side, who made a rather bad fist of things. Then Niklas Mörner, whom we must get here for next year's conference, made one of the most charming and entertaining and yet authoritative speeches I've ever had the privilege to hear. I followed up and was last on our side, and when it was put to a vote, I'm delighted to say that we carried the day by 3 votes, and that is the first time in Britain since the global warming thing appeared on the horizon that a student audience has rejected a motion that global warming is a global crisis.
Piers Corbyn, Weather Action, Long Range Forecasters, London. I have here a letter from Gordon Brown's office in London, responding to a request by me and others for evidence. Now, the UN failed to reply and the IPCC failed to reply, but Gordon Brown's office says, well, guess what, just the same as the New Zealand letter, in fact, it's word for word pretty well the same, ask the IPCC. Now, to me, that means, as was said by the speakers, that we've got to have a world, international, concerted response, because that is what they've got. And the second thing we've got to do is take what Bob Carter said absolutely seriously, is prepare to make real long-range forecasts of climate change and extreme events. And of course, I say this because we are doing this, but not many people are. And as you know, last year we predicted those deluges of snow you had, and you'll be happy to know you're going to have some more. 15th to 17th of March in the USA, and including northeast USA and northwest Australia, there will be a cyclone. But in detail, we've got to have a lot more investment, serious investment on practical defence against climate and weather extremes. Thank you.
Thank you, Piers.
From California. It would be a great boon to our effort to debunk this global warming silliness if James Hansen no longer ran NASA GIS. How can we make that happen?
John Theon, give it a shot.
I have publicly said I thought Jim Hansen should be fired, but my opinion doesn't count much, particularly when he is empowered by people like the current President of the United States. I'm not sure what we could do to have him get off of the public payroll and continue with the campaign or the crusade that he has. I think the man is sincere, but he is suffering from a bad case of megalomania.
John, don't sit down yet. This is George Taylor. John, in 2004, I'm over here in the middle. 2004, James Hansen accepted a rather sizable cash award from Teresa Heinz Kerry, and not long after publicly endorsed her husband for president. Was there anything at all illegal? Certainly seems inappropriate, but illegal about that?
Yes, that's absolutely illegal. There's a law called the Hatch Act, which prevents any civil servant, including Jim Hansen, from accepting or endorsing any political cause publicly, and he certainly did that. That alone is grounds for firing, if not imprisonment or fine. People have complained to the Inspector General of NASA, and as I say, because of Hansen's very powerful political connections, it has had no effect to date.
That's an interesting point, because a handful, as you all know, of Mr. Obama's appointments have already been investigated for not paying their taxes, and they quickly resigned. So maybe some of the people that have been outing them could make a little issue of outing Mr. Hansen, even though it was a few years ago, he's still in the government employ. That's a very good point.
Yeah, Tom Harris from International Climate Science Coalition. My question is for Professor Carter concerning the issue of regional versus global temperatures. I think you made an interesting point. I'm hoping you can expand a bit on the idea that we're always debating, is global temperature going up or down? Well, there's no super creature, you know, straddling the planet, occupying and experiencing global temperature. It's all regional. And I'm wondering if that's a point that we should expand on more when we're debating people about what global temperature is doing.
Thank you, Tom. Before I answer that, just a comment on the Hansen question. There are three reasons that you might wish to see Hansen dismissed. The first is retribution. The second is justice, which is different to retribution. And the third is because we think it would help our cause. Well, I'd like you to think about the third. I believe that there's a swing in public opinion, not just in America and Australia, but worldwide. It's very fast. And I think the politicians are increasingly out of touch with that public opinion. Very rapidly, Jim Hansen will be our ally rather than our opponent when the public starts laughing at him. Tom, your question, remind me. Regional. I don't have much more to say than I've said, beyond saying that Chris Essex, amongst others, have been telling us for a long time that the whole concept of a global temperature is something we shouldn't really be dealing with unless we're on a spacecraft receding from Earth and we can measure it spectroscopically. It might then have some meaning. It has no practical meaning whatsoever for anybody living on the planet. We're concerned about our own local temperature. And the idea that if the average global temperature changes by 1 or 2 degrees by definition, and that figure of course was plucked out of the air, there is no scientific basis whatsoever for saying warming of 1.8 degrees not dangerous, warming 2.1 degrees stop the world, I want to get off. That was a policy decision made to give them something to alarm the public about 5 years ago. So we worry about our local temperature, and we experience diurnal swings, for goodness sake, of 10 degrees or more commonly. If you happen to live in Tasmania, at the southern end of Australia, and then you move to Darwin, if you work for a firm that has branches everywhere, your average annual temperature will increase by 18 degrees Celsius. Now, the main impact that has on your life is you tend to drink more beer and more gin and tonic. People actually quite like living in Darwin, as they do here in Florida. So, yeah, I believe that local temperature and climate is far more important, but more to the point, focusing back on the other question and on Piers's comments, when we're working out how to deal with future climate change, we're not working out how to deal with future global climate change. We're working out how to deal with the US, or Western US will be different from the Eastern US. For scientists, this is good news, because it means all the work won't be done at NASA. Everywhere around the world, there'll be a need for scientists to be doing that local forecasting, planning, and research work. But I stress, it's not even in its infancy, this research. It hasn't even started, because nobody is asking that question.
Let's give the entire panel a huge round of applause. This has been amazing.